I have like a whole thing of questions.
Yay. Awesome.
So hopefully you could just bear with me because it's so weird. Like we have talked about homeschool off and on for a while, and she did homeschool like during COVID or whatever, just because I was like, well, this is kind of perfect because we were
Yeah.
thinking about it and then it was like a normal thing to do. So she did that. And then I feel like you started just like missing your friends and stuff and missing out on
Yeah.
like you were ready to go back, I think,
Yeah.
but I wasn't really ready for you to go back.
Yeah, because in sixth grade, the homeschool, it was like through my school where like you would get on a Zoom with like other people that you went to school with. And then the year after that was when I went back because no one else was really doing homeschool. And a lot of my other friends that did like the online school too were going back to in person. So that's kind of why I switched back.
Yeah, so she ended up going back, but now it's been on my mind because the youngest two are in preschool and VPK now. And the middle child, who's like my free spirit, my wild one, she does not like school. Like she does not like the structure of it. I'm cut off here. And so that's been a challenge. Oh my gosh. Hang on, let me fix this. Sorry.
No, you're totally good.
We have this new setup and I can't really
It's
ever
super
seem to
cute.
get it right.
I was
There
gonna
we
tell you,
go.
I love your neon.
Let me change the volume too. So anyhow, yeah, when we started the mastermind and Angie was talking about it and then you were talking about homeschool, I was like, this is just meant to be because I had been thinking like I need to start actively talking to other homeschool parents and get information and the real deal because I feel like so much of what you hear is probably most of it is just myths. So,
Absolutely. And also too, I think like the experience that you had with homeschool was out of necessity, right? Like it wasn't really a
yeah.
decision you got to make. So it wasn't something where you were going into the year with the decision of that's what's like best for you. So it's something that was thrown onto you. So I feel like you can't really make like you're gonna feel like you're missing out on something. You can't really
Yeah.
make that decision when it's something
Mhm.
that's not your own decision that's being made. And it's like, no, you're not allowed to be around your friends. You're not allowed to be in school. You're not allowed to do any of those things because we were all at home and it's taken away.
Mhm.
So like even with your past experience with homeschool, like don't really like try to completely separate that because even like pretty much everyone I knew, and it's different going through a school as well as compared to what like a true homeschool experience is like. So don't take what you've already experienced as like that's what homeschool is and like
Yeah.
what you're missing out on.
Well, yeah, and that because I want to get into all that too because I know there's like so many different curriculums and options and everything else. And it's very different from the way things were structured like during COVID, where, like you said, it was like out of necessity. And then the teachers weren't used to it. So they were trying to figure that out as the
Yeah.
kids were trying to figure it out. And the whole thing was just kind of a mess. Um, but now she's at the age, she's a sophomore. And then, like I said, like the younger two are getting ready to enter school. So I feel like we're at this point in time where it's coming up again. And for her, I'm just thinking like, they're starting to talk about college and careers and a lot of things that I feel like are going to be completely obsolete by the time she graduates college. And I was actually listening to this podcast episode today. I don't know if you've ever listened to the Diary of a CEO with Stephen Bartlett. Um, I just like found this podcast and he had this guest on. His name's Daniel Priestley. And he said kind of what I feel like I've been saying for a long time, but he worded it so good. He's like, our school system is preparing kids for a world that no longer exists. And what he was saying was like, with the way everything's structured, it's like that factory model, right? That like was put in place in the Industrial Revolution, where kids are taught to basically show up when the bell rings, you start your day, and then keep your mouth shut, no questioning authority. If you have to go to the bathroom, you have to ask. If you want to eat lunch, you wait till the break. And it's very structured to create a bunch of people that are going to go and be workers and just compliant and not really ask questions or anything like that.
Taxpayers.
Yeah,
Yep.
like cogs in the machine kind of thing. And he was saying that it really doesn't, it hasn't made sense for a long time, but especially now with AI, like a lot of those jobs are already
Yeah.
being replaced. So just imagine when she's done with college, like so many more will be replaced. So he's like, we have to really rethink pretty much everything we're currently doing in the school system because it's so outdated. And that's a big concern I have, right now. So,
Absolutely. I I can 100% see that. And also too, schools even from 10 years ago to now, I mean, learning Common Core, not being able to, most schools aren't teaching kids how to write cursive. How are you going to be able to read any of our founding documents? You're just going to have
mhm.
to believe what you were told. Um, Schools aren't designed, in my opinion, to make you have to think, to make you have to be able to like dream, to be able to do like make you believe in yourself that you can do whatever you want to do. Because especially I believe starting in high school, the next question is like, okay, so like what are you going to do in college? And then like you feel like if you don't go to college that you're not as good as somebody else. And exactly what you were just saying is we don't know what the future holds, but keeping it off of that same principle of over and over again learning the same things and just changing it for what that particular curriculum wants them to learn isn't actually teaching any of them the truth of what actually happened in history, of, not actually having to memorize multiplication tables, of, I feel like there's a great book and it's called Dumbing Us Down. And it's really true that we're not teaching our children how to be able to be their full potential. We're trying to, make them good little taxpayers and follow into the
Yep.
conformity of everything that's around us.
Oh my gosh, I 100% agree. And I feel like other parents that give me a hard time about, like, if I bring up homeschool, are people that are in a job that they hate. And I'm
Yeah.
like, are you not putting the pieces together? Like, let me help you connect the dots. Like, and we're so conditioned to just like go through life, like you said, be good little taxpayers, but not not be fulfilled by what you're doing. Like, just chalk it up to like life is hard, everyone hates their job, and you just push through. That's kind of like my mentality. I mean, I probably put that on you, so I want you to think for yourself, but that's just the way I look at it. I feel like there's so much conditioning. So maybe we should probably start with this. Like, tell me because you were homeschooled, right? For your entire childhood or just part of your childhood?
Yeah, so my mom actually got her degree in education and psychology.
Okay.
So she had actually planned on being a teacher in her first, I think, like year in school. She had like kids pull switchblades on her and like that kind of stuff. And she's like, you know what, I'm done. Like
Wow.
this is not for me. My Nana, so her mom was a school teacher. So, we always had that enabled into us. And my dad was the one who was like, I'm not sending her to school. Like, it's not happening. And she was like, what do you mean? And so he had her read Dumbing Us Down and Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and, just a lot of those books of he's like, if she fails, I want it to be my responsibility. If she doesn't do everything she wants to do in this life, if she doesn't learn everything that she wants to learn, that's going to be something that's my fault. But it's not, I'm not going to give what he would say was, I'm not going to give my most precious thing in the world to have her future shaped by someone I wouldn't even want to have lunch with.
Oh my
And
gosh. Oh, well, that is so good. I
and so
mean,
that's what he truly took on. And so we had a family friend who taught kindergarten and really wanted me in her class. And my mom was like, it was a school district that I wasn't even a part of. And my mom was like, I'm not going to lie to like have her be able to be in her class. And she's like, no, don't worry about it. Like, we'll get her in. Well, the teacher ended up lying for my mom because my mom put the correct thing and she actually like forged documents to get me into her class. Um, I was in the morning class, like it was half day. I was in the morning class. The afternoon class of my first day of kindergarten, the playground was shot up by the high schoolers. Um, the teacher that was a family friend ended up having a nervous breakdown because her husband left her. And so she stopped teaching. So the student teacher became the teacher, which I didn't even know was legal. So it went from me being like excited to go to like screaming in the car that like I didn't want to go. And my mom was like, okay, like we're not going to do this. The last time that she took me in, the teacher tried to grab me and actually hit my head on the door frame, like trying to pull me back into the classroom.
Oh my God.
And my mom had gone into that, into the parent teacher meeting of me going to kindergarten, was like, what can I expect her to know by the end of the year? And they're like, oh, well, we expect her to be able to like recognize her letters. And I was like, well, she can read. So she was like, it's fine. Like, we'll just use it as social time and everything. And my mom always says it was very interesting because up until that point, she had always taken on upon herself of she needed to teach me. So like she had taught me to read. She had, I knew my numbers. I was doing math, all of those kind of things. And she said, as soon as I put you in school, all the responsibility was off of me. And she's like, I never worked with you for anything. She's like, and it's crazy as a parent how like that switch just kind of flipped and it was like, oh, well, it's in school. So like hands off, like no longer my job. And she's like, that's not the case. The school, my great grandmother was like 90 years old. And so we needed to go out to St. Louis to take care of her. And the school wouldn't let me out. And my mom was like, what is she going to miss? Like pasting? Like,
Yeah.
but come to find out, like later in the time, you have to go to school for a certain amount of days to be able to get federal funding. So if your child misses that many days, that's the reason why there's all the rules and regulations on how many days they have to be in school because they miss a certain amount. I think it's like 180 days. If they're below that amount of time, then the school doesn't get the funding for your child. So, that's why they wouldn't want to let me out and all of that. And so we never went back so my mom pulled me out. The assistant teacher hit my head on the door frame and that was it. They never called my mom to find out what happened after she called to disenroll me. Never did anything until the next year. And they're like, oh, we miss her. And she's like, you should have called a year ago.
Right.
Like, why are you not doing that? And my dad was like, I told you from day one, like, we never should have done this. But, so ingrained in my mom and so ingrained from my Nana and everything else. And so my mom was like, okay, we're homeschooling. And my Nana used to like call my mom at night and she'd be crying, saying that, my mom was ruining my future. And my grandfather would, tell my mom how disappointed he was in her, that, she should know better for, what would be best for my future and all those kind of things. And my mom, and, back when I was homeschooled, it was kind of those things where it was like the mountain children, right? Like it was always kind of the kids who were kind of weird, like weren't really sociable. Like it's just,
Yeah.
that's what it was. And my mom was like, no, this is what I'm doing. Like, and my dad reiterated more books to her and all that kind of stuff. And he's like, we're not doing it. And so from that point forward, I was homeschooled. I homeschooled all the way through 12th grade. My mom had me do, and there's, like you said, there's so many curriculums, so many different things. And we did like online school. At my point, co-ops were really a thing, which are super prevalent now, but that really wasn't a thing back then. And there was like online schools, but it wasn't like live teaching online schools. And so my mom mainly used a Becca with me, which people love, people hate, everyone has an opinion about everything. But Becca was a video school. So you actually like at the time got a VHS tape and like it was a recording of a classroom. So the teacher would be like, okay, students at home, what's your answer? Students in the classroom, and those kind of things. And so like she could actually work because she owned her own business and she was in the position to be able to take me with her. So she could actually work. And all through elementary school, it took an hour and a half a day. Middle school was about 3 hours, and then high school was like a full load, like 6 to 8 hours a day. And that's including homework, like that, doing everything related to school. And what's nice about Rebecca is I did it for all of high school. So I actually have my high school diploma. So I didn't have to get my GED. Because that's also another thing that like society makes you feel like you're less than if you only have a GED. So I actually have my diploma. And I always said, as far as like college went, that, and this was before they were doing dual enrollment, which is a thing that they do now. So I believe starting like your junior year, you can actually enroll in the local college and when you graduate high school, you'll actually graduate with your associates. So they didn't do that back in my time. And so I always said if I needed college, I would absolutely go. But so far at this point in my life, I haven't found anything that I actually needed college for. I've done tons of different trades. and my mom had said the same thing. My dad always felt like he was inferior because he didn't go to college. And my mom always said that college was the biggest waste of time of her whole entire life. So like I had both extremes as my parents. And my mom was always like, what are you going to go to college for? And I was like, well, if I go, she's like, if you go, like, what is it? And I was like, business. And she's like, what do you think that a professor could teach you that you don't already know or I've already could teach you from owning a business for the last 25 years? Like, what is it that they're going to teach you the theory, but that's not the same thing as actually living it and doing it. And so that's where I've kind of lived from. And that's the same thing that I'm instilling in my kids is like, if you want to go to college, great, I'll support you. But there's so many things in this world that you can do that you don't necessarily need that's not going to be something that's necessarily beneficial to you. And you want to be a doctor, you got to go to college. You want to be a lawyer, you're going to have to go to college. But if there's other things that you want, there's other ways to be able to support yourself and have an amazing life and career that fulfills you without traditional schooling.
It's so funny because I went to college for business and it was the week of graduation. So the end of the 4-year degree. And my business professor was like, yeah, so everything that you guys learned is going to be obsolete in about 3 to 4 years. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, what? Like, so we just spent all this time and money, and basically none of it matters. It's all going to be obsolete. And he's like, well, you're lucky because the people in like computer science, that'll be obsolete in another 12 months. And so it was just like wild. And when I got into the real world, nothing that I learned in college helped me in business. Nothing. I mean, everything that I learned, I had to learn from doing it, from taking action. And now what I do now has zero to do with any schooling that I've ever received at all.
Exactly.
Um, so, that's something to consider because a lot of the things that you're interested in don't really require a degree. There are things you could do, you could start doing now or start doing when you graduate high school.
Yeah.
So,
And because I was homeschooled, I got to start life early, right? Like I got to own my own company when I was under 18. I was already making full-time salaries by the time I was 18. Like
so what
I
was
got
like your first job or your first company as a homeschooler?
so my mom always owned her own company, so I worked for her. My grandfather was an attorney. My nana was a school teacher up until she became his office manager. So my whole life she was his office manager because grandparents. So I worked for them. But then after that, I was actually a dance teacher. And I was head coach of 2 dance teams. I taught 26 classes a week from 2 through adult. And yeah, I was an independent contractor. And I started doing that when I was like 16 and a half. And I did that up until I was 19. When I was 18, I started my own eyelash extension company. So I got certified to do lashes and I started that. And then that continued to grow and grow until I had people working under me. And then we grew again and I missed teaching, but I wanted to teach something that had more meaning than dance did. And so that's when I got my yoga teaching certificate, my RYT 200. And I was like, well, do I really like want to open a studio? Do I want to teach? I think I just want to teach for someone else. I ended up opening a hot yoga studio, which we still have to this day.
Oh, I love hot yoga.
Yes, so we still have that. I mean, I moved away, but my studio is still open. And we also I got my kinesiology certificate. So I do applied
Oh my
kinesiology.
gosh. Okay. See, this is meant to be. She literally, we just talked about this last night and she was like, I'm kind of interested in that. And maybe I should look into that because she went to, like, her doctor did that with her. And we've both been talking about it ever since. We're like blown away. We were literally talking about this last night. That's so wild.
Yeah, so I went through Dr. J. Dunn, who's absolutely amazing. Right now, her focus is methylation, but I learned how to do applied kinesiology, which also was a ton of different, like she taught me like NFT, EMDR, like all of that kind of stuff. So there's a bunch of extra pieces like on the mental side of things, which was really cool that I got to learn how to do. Also got to kind of learn how to do like kinesiotaping and all of that kind of stuff. So anatomy. I've gotten to go down a path of things that have really interested me at the time, because if you had asked me when I was 18, like if I liked anatomy, I would have been like, heck no. Like,
Right.
I
Yeah.
was still kind of freaked out by the human body. I was like, ha, no, that's not something I want to do. Like, anatomy fascinates me, like how the body works, like the brain works, like how everything is connected, reproductive, like hormones. Like, I am enthralled by that. But if you would have asked me when I was 18, like what I wanted to do now, being 33, I would not have chosen the path that I am on now because it's not something that would have even interested me. But now it's what feeds my soul. And I would have felt like I would have stuck what I would have done in college because I would have owed so much money that like I would have felt that I
Exactly.
was stuck doing that. Otherwise, I would have been a disappointment. And nobody would have made me feel that way, but that's like the expectations I would have put on myself. Like I wouldn't have wanted to like I would have been disappointed in myself that I wasted my time, I wasted everyone's money, I wasted everything else by not doing what I went to school for. That I could tell you that I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing right now at all if I had to
That's
have
one of the
when I was
things that I struggled with. It took me 12 years to leave the corporate world. And that was one of the things I was like, I'm going to let everyone down because they paid for my degree. And what, that's just going to go to waste. And that was like weighing on me as, a thing. And, it's interesting because you've pivoted a lot. You've done all these different things, but
Mhm.
that's life. It's like when you're a teenager, you don't know what you're going to want to do for the rest of your life. But you had the flexibility to be able to do that. And you had the entrepreneurial spirit to do that. I feel like that is something that really gets kind of like beaten out of you through school. Like you're so focused on like, I'm going to sit down and like work for someone else, work for the teacher. Like you don't you don't build that sense of initiative and like figuring things out on your own. And so I think it almost like limits you in a lot of ways because you're just not raised to think that way.
And that's something that's amazing that my mom did was she made a lot of my extracurriculars actually into businesses. So when I was 7, we started a jewelry company together. So we both took like beading classes and I learned how to make jewelry. And so like I had a jewelry company from the time that I'm 7. And now actually I have a permanent jewelry company. So I've kind of come full circle with that. And my permanent jewelry company is my largest business right now. Um, but like my mom always made those into things like okay, like you love baking. Let's enter the state fair. Let's learn how to do it better. Like, when I was 18, like if you asked me what I wanted to do, like when my Nana was like, what do you want to do with your life? Like what I was like, I want to go to culinary school. Like not at all what I'm interested in right now, but like if you had asked me when I was 18, like that's what I would have done. Like if my grandparents had been here because they would have forced me to go to college because they were very controlling in the way like they withheld money and they like it was like my Nana, she passed away when I was 12, but she was already talking about getting me a car. And she was like, well, I'm going to get you a sports car. I was like, I don't want a sports car. I want a truck. And she's like, well, I'm going to get, this is what, if you want me to spend my money to get you something, I'm getting you a sports car. And I was like, well, then don't spend your money because that's not what I want.
Right.
So I was like, no one asked you to get that. Like I can work and like get that myself. Like, and that's how my grandparents like always controlled everything. And it was kind of like, if you want your inheritance, like we had to get a master's. Well, I didn't do any of that because but that was
Yeah.
like their form of control, right? And it's, like I have, even with my kids and like going through the homeschooling books and everything like that, like I have a really big problem how like it's whoever decides to write the book is the person who's deciding what history you learn. It's
Yes.
whoever decides to write the book of what is right and what is wrong. And so, especially like going through the mastermind that like I'm going through with you right now and stuff, it's really teaching us how to completely conform ourselves into just being the smallest, least light as possible. Like, the whole bully situation and, all the, I never had to go through that. And that's not to say that I didn't have, the extracurriculars where I was dancing, I was figure skating, like I was doing all those things. And it's not to say that I didn't go through the things of like people saying mean things to me and there's people who didn't like me and all that kind of stuff. But it wasn't day in, day out, 5 days a week. I mean, when I was in high school, we didn't have suicide the same way that we do now because of how these kids are being treated. And no one, like teachers aren't able to stand up for the other kids. Teachers aren't even able to stand up for themselves. And so we're creating something that's just going to crash and burn, in my opinion. Like there's only so much longer that we can have this continue on this path with no one having to take any responsibility for anything and be able to like grow and be successful.
Yeah.
Yeah. The whole system needs to be like taken apart and rebuilt. And there's people, that are obviously like very much against that. But that I think one of the biggest things for me with pushing the whole homeschool thing is that very thing. Like last year, the last 2 years, if I lost count of how many times she texted me saying the school's on lockdown,
Yeah.
active shooter threat. And I mean that last one was terrifying because we
Yeah.
really thought that, something bad was going to happen. And I told her, I'm like, if we get one more threat, you're just not going back to school. Like I can't live like this worrying that, someone's going to come and like shoot up the school or something. So there's that whole aspect of it. But like what you were saying with the bullying too, it's like, I want to kind of like get your opinion on the social aspects of
Yeah.
homeschooling because you were saying how that was a stigma when you were younger, but I feel like it still is because I'll have friends that I'll bring up homeschooling to, and they're like, yeah, but like homeschool kids are like weird and awkward. And I'm like, do you even know any homeschool kids? It like they
Yeah.
don't. It's just this perception. But I kind of feel like maybe it's the opposite because like think about it, like I feel like there's things that maybe you hold back on with
Yeah.
like the podcast for example because it's like, well, what are the kids at school going to think?
Yeah.
So there's like that aspect of it where like you almost put up a wall in a way because you're dealing with so much pressure from peers.
What's funny is we were actually just talking about this. I had a pep rally at school today, and I'm in charge of like picking people for the games because I'm the spirit representative for my class. And I was like trying to get my friend Michelle to do it. And I was like, Michelle, do the game, like at least do one of them. Like you never want to do any of the games or anything. She's like, well, yeah, like don't you like she was like, why don't you think I don't want to do them? She's like, our grade is the most judgmental in the entire school. The sophomore class is the most judgmental out of every single grade. And then once she said that, I was like, yeah. And now I see why no one wanted to do like any of the pep rally games or any of that because
Mm-hmm.
the sophomore class is the most judgmental. The freshmen didn't care. They went and did a whole bunch of games. The seniors did, the juniors did. The sophomore class was just like dead silent.
Yeah. Well, and I grew up, so I did go to school. I went to public school for all 12 years. And I, like, if you ask my mom or like friends or whatever, they'd be like, oh, yeah, Stephanie was so shy. She was so shy. I wasn't shy. I was just terrified of getting bullied and made fun of. So I would just keep my mouth shut because I'm like, if I be myself, like, I'm literally going to get made fun of, which, like, I probably would have because
Yeah.
the 90s were kind of rough. Like, people, like, so anyhow, I want to get your perspective on the social aspect and like how did you feel as especially as like a teenager? Did you feel like you were missing out? Did you get a lot of that social aspect? Like what was your take on it?
So my mom always had me with like my mom always had me in things. So like I was always around kids who were my own age, but I was honestly more comfortable around adults. Like you put me in a room, like a boardroom, I could give you a presentation in front of 100 people when I was 13 years old. Like none public speaking, being around adults, having those conversations were never anything that scared me. Um, Kids my own age, honestly, I just thought they were really dumb. Like that
That's how I
and
feel.
yeah,
I
like I
swear,
just
Peyton, you and Alexa, you were like the same person. It's so
It
weird.
was so funny that you brought up the jewelry and the baking thing because I literally had a baking blog when I was in elementary school and a jewelry business in middle school.
it's amazing. Except that's, I think a lot of times, and I honestly wasn't bullied. So this is a lot of outside looking in. So, grain of salt, obviously. But from a lot of what I see, the people who are like the bullies are generally the people who are afraid to be their true authentic self. And
Mhm.
so they're judging the other people for having that light to be able to do that. And like,
Yep, I
that's
agree.
that's generally where it comes from their own insecurity and honestly it comes stems from jealousy that they can't be comfortable enough with themselves to be able to doing the same thing that someone else is doing. So they're trying to bring them down to their level. It's the same thing in like office politics and all of that kind of stuff. And in high school, I had three really like best friends. But like I was working, like I had my own businesses and that kind of stuff. So, they were in school all day. I got school done like in an hour and a half, and then I was out making money. And we would still have our times where we would go to movies and we would go to dinners. And, I did a lot of the normal teenage stuff, but I had only a few hours that was contained to school. And then other than that, I was free and ready to go. In high school, I actually did schooling a little bit differently. And I did the same subject for like a whole entire week, but I did like the whole entire month of it. So then that way, like my brain was just like in math mode, and I just did like all of math and got that done for the month. And then the next week I did all of science. So like I just ran through it that way. As soon as the lesson was over, I did homework. And so that way it was like fresh on my mind, and I got it done. And then I was working, and like I loved it. Like, and I didn't have one person that was my own age that didn't ask their parents to be homeschooled. There wasn't one kid that I met that was around my age that wasn't like, oh my God, you're so lucky. Like, I wish I could be doing that.
Oh
That's
yeah. I
what
would
my
have
parents were
loved to
like.
be homeschooled. I
Yeah.
hated school. Like I always got good grades, so no one understood why I hated school, but I just didn't want to be there. And that's how I feel like my middle child is. Like she's only
Yeah.
5, but like it's just not her thing. She's like, I don't want to be there. And she told me the other day, she's like, Mom, why can't we just do science experiments all day? And I'm just like, well, why don't we? Like, if you're interested in that, then why am I forcing you to go to
Yeah.
like this school and do something you don't want to do? And so I just feel very conflicted, like
Yeah.
as a parent, because it's a big decision.
Well, honestly, the only people that I know have a problem with homeschooling are people who wouldn't put the time and effort into doing that for their kids themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it can be whatever excuse they want it to be. It can be that they have to work. And so like then they wouldn't have money, and so then they don't have time. They can make whatever excuse that they want, but generally it comes into that same thing of bullying, right? Like they feel inferior that you're able to do something that they would like to do as well.
Yeah.
And like that was my grandparents saying that to my mom.
Mhm.
That was, there's always, if you're doing something that's different than the norm of what's been ingrained in you from day one is what's normal, you're going to have the kickback of what other people's opinions are. And then it's up to you whether you decide you let that dictate your future or whether you rise above and do what's best for you and for your family.
Well, yeah. And what you said that your dad had said about, if I wouldn't even want to go to lunch with these people, why am I like letting them, pretty much raise my kid? Because
Yeah.
that's pretty much what's happening. And I think, there's been a lot of parents since COVID that kind of realized like my values do not align with the overall values of like the education system right now.
Yeah.
And that's
Well-
where I'm at. Like, I do not agree with probably 90% of the things that she tells me that are going on.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
like,
in COVID, what happened was parents got to actually learn what their children were learning because they got to hear it from the other room. As where before you could stick your head in the sand and your kid failed, that wasn't on you, right? Like you got them to school on time, you did what you were supposed to do, and so you didn't have to take that responsibility for your child. And also too, like comparatively, homeschooling is a lot less expensive than going to like public school. But, for example, I pay like $7,000 in property taxes. $5,000 of that goes to the schools that I don't utilize.
yeah,
But like that's a part of it, right? So people are always like, oh, well, school is free. I'm like, school's not free. It's just you're forced to pay it. And you either decide to utilize it or not. But there's actually talks about there being a $10,000 stipend per child. And the child actually is the person who gets it. So that account is attached to the child and not attached to the school.
yeah.
So like for anything
I
that you want,
agree.
and I don't know if that's going to go through or anything like that, but at least it's something that's talked about, which would be hugely beneficial because if you didn't have the money constraint with it as well, for a lot of families, it could change a lot of things because it's going to be able to, what they're talking about is include things like museum passes and the aquarium and the zoos and all the things that you can do that are educational and those kind of things that are really cool. But like for example, I use Abeka, and my best friend went to a Christian high school in Albuquerque, and that school I think was like 25,000 a year, somewhere around there for that high school. And so we had the exact same curriculum, exact same books. We started the school year at the exact same time, ended the school year at the exact same time. The only difference was she only got through a quarter of her book. I got through the whole entire book.
Yeah.
My school, to have fully accredited at the time, cost like $1,200 a year. And that's because we did accredited. Because my mom was like, that way you have your diploma, and if you want to do something different, you have that base and you don't have to worry about doing anything else.
Yeah.
So, as far as the social aspect, like for my kids and that kind of thing too, is this sounds like really controlling, but I get to control who they're with, how long they're with them, what they're doing. I get to be the helicopter parent. I get to be the person who's always there. My kids, all three of my kids are competitive figure skaters. And it's either my husband, my mom, or I that are there from the time they get there to the time they leave. Like I trust their coach with my life, but like I'm there, I'm present. I get to be there for all of that. I get to step in, where they have the friends that like say whatever, but like all my kids are in elementary school and it's like an hour and a half a day. And my oldest daughter has dyslexia. So, it was, if it took her a month to learn the letter A, it could take her a month to learn the letter A because there was no outside peer pressure that was making her feel inferior or any different. And as far as like my kids that are elementary school age, like they still have their like light, if that makes sense. Like they're not
Yes.
filtering themselves to fit into someone else's box.
Mhm.
Like my oldest daughter is 10 and she puts on like these magnificent like shows where like we all have to be in the living room, and like she does like costuming and music and she dances and does all those things. Like, and one of her friends who's 11 that goes to school is like literally being kicked off of Tinder twice a week.
Yeah.
Like the difference, right? Of just she's exactly 1 year old or 11 years old, and TikTok, she's on all the social medias. She's, on 4 different ADHD, all these different medications and everything else because nobody can handle her or control her. And then we have a kid who's allowed to be a kid that I get to show, there's so many things that are in the adult world that she's going to get to find out. And she has a lot of years that she's going to get to know that, but there's only so many years that I can protect and let her be the little fairy that she is. Like, let her not have to worry about anything of the world and just truly like shine and like
Oh my
let
gosh. This is
like
like making me feel so much better about just like where my mindset is, because that's literally what was going through my mind with Amelia, taking her to school and just watching her struggle, because she's such a like free
Yeah.
spirit. She has this like bright shining light, like she's just has that personality, but like I feel like already this experience is like chipping away at that. And as a mom, it's hard to watch that. I'm like forcing her to go somewhere that she's begging me not to take her to. And I agree 100% with what you're saying about protecting them from friends and stuff, because even people you were
Yeah.
friends with, like I find things out where I'm like, oh my gosh, like
Yeah.
that is not a good, probably a good person to hang out with.
Yeah. And I feel like when I think about it too, with the social aspect, like when I really think about it, it's like, okay, I have been at like school with the same people for the past like 12 years. And I know pretty much like, I know everyone's name, but like, I don't really like know them. Like, I don't really talk to them. Like, if you were to ask me to like name every single, if you were to put me in a room, like at school and ask me to name every single person, I probably could. But like, I don't actually like talk to any of them, and I couldn't even tell you like what their favorite color is. Like I don't talk to any of them
Right.
unless the only time, even with like the people I am friends with, the only time I talk to them is if like I am like, if I'm hosting like a party or something like that. Like none of me and my friends, we don't like hang out or anything like that, because the friends I do hang out with live like an hour or so away. So
And
then it's like,
everyone's like in their sports and stuff. But that's the thing, like once you're out of high school, you don't really, most of those people you don't really stay in touch with
yeah,
anyways. You make new friends as you go through
yeah,
different phases of your life.
yeah. And the only girl that I really am like close with that lives like close to us is doing homeschool right now.
Yeah. And I don't know, I feel like what you were saying, like you had your three close friends, like I would rather have three really good friends than like 30 people that don't that make
Yeah.
you feel insecure or aren't really, true friends and things like that. So,
I never understand why someone wants their child to have like this social aspect because I don't know what they gain from it. Because what you're hoping is that you're comfortable around other people, but school is the only time in your life that you're surrounded by someone who is your same age.
yes.
After that, you are never, you are never going to be completely surrounded by that. So why are we so worried about our child fitting in with the same people who are the same age?
Right.
That's
Yeah,
not
you're
gonna
not preparing them for the real world. I mean, people say that,
no,
like, well, I want them to be ready for the real world, but the school is not the real world. And
no,
you're right.
because
You're never going to be with around 30 of your peers all day long for 6 hours in a room.
no,
Yeah.
and
And I'm
even in school, like you said, there's 30 people in your class or whatever, like there's probably one or two people that you actually talk to and hang out
yeah. Yeah, and like I feel like too, I'm in a lot of clubs and stuff at school. And like what you said with being like forced to be around people your own age, like I feel like I like am more on the same level of like hanging out with and connecting with like the seniors that I'm in clubs with than I am with like the sophomores. Like I don't really talk to any of them. I talk to like the juniors or like some freshmen, but like I don't really talk to anyone in my grade.
with.
I feel like you get along better with my friends than some of the kids
I
you know.
know. Absolutely. My
You
husband is
know,
8 years older than me for that same exact thing because I'm like,
yeah.
I could not stand boys that were my own age. I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, no, like that, there's no way in all, and
Right.
also too, like the adult principle of like, if you're the smartest person in the room, you need to find a new room because you
Yes.
should be growing, you should always be learning. So why are we spending 12 years not surrounding ourselves by people who stretch our limitations?
No, it's so true.
Yeah.
We're instead you can, and also too, teachers are really only able to teach to the person who's the least smart.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So you're constantly surrounded by like things that you probably get instantly, but we're wasting 20 minutes because people don't understand it.
Yeah, I feel like the thing with that you said too with being the smartest in the room, that's kind of like how I feel like it is at school because like my history class, for example, I'm 5 assignments ahead of everyone else. And my teacher even said something because like everyone was just sitting there like not doing anything. And he's like, you realize the only person in this classroom who has a right to not be doing something is Alexis because she's ahead.
But then
And
they're
And
saying,
by singling you out, then now you have a target on your back for a bunch of people who are going to start doing crappy things.
yeah.
well, yeah, and it's like I mean, all her teachers are saying that, like she's bored. Okay,
Mhm.
well,
Yeah.
that's a problem. Like, I mean, you're in school for 6 hours a day. Like, think about if you could just spend that time focusing on like something you find really interesting,
Yeah.
something, that you is aligned with what you want to do. I mean, I don't know. It's just, I feel like there's so much they teach them, but they're not really teaching them anything.
Yeah.
Like you're filling your mind with a bunch of stuff you're not going to use in the real world. Um,
When have I ever used calculus?
right.
Like, why am I like, I mean, it's something that I learned because like I had to, but like we're not learning anything in school, like you said, that is preparing us to actually be able to take on the world.
Yeah, we're
There's
not
no
learning
things.
about finances, investing, starting a business, quantum physics. Like, oh my gosh, going through what we're doing now in the mastermind, I'm like, this should be taught to every child
Yeah.
to help them understand that. But it's just none of that's
The
taught.
danger, right? Like that's a danger to the whole entire society
Right.
to be able to have someone be able to be so open and to dream so largely that they actually believe that they can change the world because you believe it and you can, but you're not going to have the people to work if you allow them to bloom and actually be the person that they're supposed to be.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I came across this video the other day, and this guy is like, you put your kids in school. He was a homeschool dad, obviously. He's like, you put your kids in school for 6 hours a day where they're taught you better be silent and do not speak out of turn or you're in big trouble. And he said, and then they come home from school and parents are wondering, why won't my kid talk to me? And it's
Yeah.
like, well, you just trained them that like if you speak out of turn that, you're going to
Yeah.
get in trouble. And I think that's a problem too, is like there's, especially with teenagers, like why won't they talk to me? I mean, I feel like you talk to me, but
Yeah.
I think, you're kind of conditioning kids to you're supposed to be seen and not heard, and don't talk out of turn, don't ask questions, just listen to what you're told, and that's that.
Yeah. And I feel like that goes along too with like parents being like super strict too. And then they wonder why like their kids don't want to like talk to them and stuff. Cause most of my friends, like, they tell her more stuff than they tell their own parents. Like,
Yeah, well, that's what I learned. What I learned like growing up, all of my friends that had parents that were very like a certain very like restrictive, they all rebelled, all those kids.
yeah.
And so I don't know, but I think the point is like you want your kid to be able to talk to you, and I feel like we kind of train them not to, not
Yeah.
to talk out of
And
turn.
we're also kind of trained that our emotions don't mean anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're taught to suck it up, to move on, that, you know, that you're not supposed to feel. You're not supposed to, you have a bully, you have that kind of thing. Okay, cool. Like, move on. Like, don't let them affect you. We're not taught proper coping mechanisms on how to actually like handle the world. And it's, I feel like especially through like traditional ways, the way that that's handled is through medications, which have side effects, which then go into another side effect and another side effect. And then we're wondering why what's happening in the world is happening. And it's like, well, you literally put them on something that like the number one side effect is suicide. Like, and you're surprised
Yeah.
rather than actually having support systems in place from day one to actually be able to teach people like what you're feeling is valid, and like let's actually work through it if it's not like beneficial to you, but like not suppress everything to fit into like what needs to happen. Because we're taught that you're supposed to work from 9 to 5. You go to right, you start school starts that way, then you work from 9 to 5. You look forward to having your weekends off. You work for 50 years and you can have 20 years left over, like if you're lucky. And we're not taught that, no, like from day one, you can be following your dreams, and you can put in the work that society requires. So that way we've checked that box as a parent, that we made sure that they have their high school diploma and that they're not gonna, have the state come after you or anything like that. But at the same point, being able to like allow them to grow and allow them to bloom and like learn to do things on their own and to actually be their own person.
Yeah. And when you said like you check this box that you did what you were supposed to do or whatever, I think I think subconsciously, I think this just kind of came to the surface as you were talking. Like as a parent, I think, well, am I going to regret this? Like if I start homeschooling the little ones, for example, in 12 years, am I going to be like, oh my gosh, like why did I do that? But the reality is no. I've
Mhm.
never met a homeschool parent that's like, I really regret doing that. But I
Yeah.
do meet a lot of parents whose kids were in the school system where there are so many issues, like you said, mental health issues, and they're being medicated. And it's like, well, what do you expect when, especially you take like a little boy and you put him in a classroom and you don't let him run or see the
Mhm.
sunlight, like that's going to cause him to be hyper, and then you want to medicate. Like it's so backwards the way things are right now.
Yeah, and I feel like that was why too, like I had a bad experience with homeschool before because when you think about it, it was during COVID, so obviously it's not like you can go out to different places. Like you're just kind of like stuck in your room doing a Zoom call. But then I feel like now if I were to do that, it would be a lot different because it's like, oh, like I'll do school for a little bit and I could go do this or do that and then, you know.
And you don't have, I mean, you can choose a curriculum that you join a live classroom and you're on Zoom and you have that structure if that's what you thrive in. I never was thriving in that type of atmosphere. My kids don't thrive in that kind of atmosphere. So all the way up until high school, we don't do accredited. We do what we need to do, and I make sure that they know what they need to know. but like, you keep diaries of all the different kind of stuff, and each state has different regulations, but you know, you can do homeschool within your own terms, right? Where it's you wake up early, you get to do, have your morning routine and then throw some school in. And then, like when I was doing it, my friends would always be texting me in class and I would be texting them and like in high school. And, I'm literally sitting at the dining room table doing math, eating my sandwich, like I'm eating at the same time. I'm like all the different things that I'm doing while I'm learning because we don't have to sit in a chair under fluorescent lights. That's damaging all sorts of additional things, right? Like we don't have to be in that type of environment to be able to learn. We can
Yeah.
learn in our bed. We can learn, you can have all those different things where as long as you're retaining the information, you're going to find a place when like you're homeschooling of like what works best of where you're at, where you feel the most comfortable. What do you need to be doing? What are some helpful study aids that you have? Maybe it's a certain type of gum. Like there's all sorts of different things that you're able to do to customize it to make it the best learning experience for you rather than changing yourself and how you learn to fit a textbook.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and her school starts at what time? Like 7:10.
Yeah, but most people like if you take the bus, your bus comes around like 6 in the morning and most people get to school around like 6:30, 6:40. And
So it's dark outside. And this has been a big pet peeve of mine because I'm like, there's plenty of scientific research to show you need the sunlight in the morning. You should have it in your eyes, on your
yeah.
skin. This is like literally what wakes your body up and I mean everything. And they're in a concrete building when it's dark out, but like not even seeing the sunlight. So
Yeah.
then the governor like implemented something a couple years ago, but it doesn't go into effect until she graduates. And I'm like, this is just so ridiculous. So, it's just things like that. And like we went to her cross country banquet was like in the cafeteria, and we're in the cafeteria, and I told my husband, I was like, this looks like a prison cafeteria.
It really does. That's what I thought when I walked in there on my first day of school. I was like, geez, are we in prison?
Yeah, I mean, the whole school looks that way. And I'm like, it is basically like a prison, the way it's set up and but the crazy part is, do you follow Casey Means at all, or have you seen any of her stuff? Okay, I love her. She was saying that maximum security prisons, like their prisoners, get more time outside than kids in school.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like, how crazy is that? So it's like,
we wonder why all their hormones are off.
Right.
Like, vitamin D is a hormone. Like nobody talks about that, right? So like we literally need the sun to be able to produce that, but that's one of our governing hormones. So like you literally get rid of sun exposure, you switch it over to blue light, which is what fluorescent light is, that's constantly flickering. And we're surprised that there's hormone issues. We're surprised that our kids don't look like our society doesn't look like what our society looked like in the 70s because of all the things that we eat. I mean, look at the foods that you eat at school. I'm sure they're super nutritious, right?
I willingly refuse. You could not force me to eat the school food because it doesn't even look like the food doesn't even look edible. Like it looks like something, you know how like in commercials they'll like set up the food so that it looks like perfect, but none of it like actually looks edible. It looks like plastic. That's literally what the food looks like. Like the pizza is green. The food is just disgusting. And it's like, ugh, someone found like a worm crawling on their strawberries. And it's just like,
we're supposed to have nutrients, right? Like we expect our brains to be able to grow and function and everything else without any nutrients. We're supposed to eat like every 2 hours a day. Like we're supposed to be fueling our body. Like no, like you're supposed to go like a 4 hour stretch and then you get one thing and then that's it. Half the time when you have PE in high school, your PE is also inside under those same type of lights. And then we expect you to thrive. We throw off your circadian rhythm and we give you so much homework that you're also stuck inside. And you only have time with your parents who are like your guiding light in everything in life of right, like how you're supposed to be shaped and formed and everything else. And we're supposed to be able to accomplish that in 2 weekend days in about 2 to 3 hours a day. which those 2 to 3 hours, you're pressuring them to do homework and then you're trying to get them out the door because they're not functioning because they're supposed to be asleep.
Yeah.
Like that's the reason why like farmers and forever, like they woke up with the sun, they went to bed with the sun. Like time, like with the whole thing, right? Like time is just our illusion. It's what we've put into everything of being able to have control and conform into every piece of it. But we expect our kids then to be able to thrive and be an active part of society when we're setting them up for failure.
Yeah. And even with like with the whole waking up thing, like all through middle school and last year, I did like full-time school where I would like wake up when it was still dark out and stuff. But now my school has like a program where you can do like your first and second period off campus. So that's what I'm doing this year. And I feel like I've like school-wise, I've like had so much better grades and thrived so much more this year. So like when you think about it, it's like, okay, well, if I did all of my classes off campus, like how much better would that be? Considering that just taking two off campus was good.
And
Yeah.
also to the majority of the districts, you're able to still do the same, you're able to do extracurriculars within that district
Yeah.
because
I think that might be becoming a law with the new administration, because I think that was one of the things with that like $10,000 whatever stipend or
yeah.
whatever, where they have to let you go and do the dances, the sports, like whatever
And
you
it
want to do at your
depends
school.
on your state because like I'm in Missouri now and where we are, they automatically include homeschoolers because we have a really, really large homeschooler community. So we're already allowed to do that. Now the majority of us all do all-star instead. So like we're doing different sports anyway than high school sports. But like that's something that is just in our state because they support that. In Missouri, what's really cool is like, and that was one of when we were looking to move from New Mexico because New Mexico is, I believe, currently ranked 50th for education. Like from the time I was growing up, is either 45th to 50th. It's never been fantastic. There's a family friend of mine that I know that he graduated high school and he could not read and he could not write and he could not spell, but he has his high school diploma. And so like that's basically if you want education, like you have to take control of it there. And the private schools just have more expensive drugs. And so like there's not really a difference. Like my friend who went to the private Christian high school, I think she had 10 girls and I think 20 boys in her like graduating class. And I think 5 of the girls ended up pregnant within the first 2 years after like graduating high school because it was like so restrictive. And it's just when you have all those things into place, when we were looking to move in COVID, I was like, okay, we need to find a place that like we can homeschool, that like it's small business friendly, like all the things that will like check off the boxes. And Missouri was the closest geographically besides Alabama, but Alabama was a very lateral move instead of like ranked 48th for like poverty, it was like ranked 46th. Like, it's a very lateral move, a little bit higher, but very lateral. Like Missouri is like 29th or 30th. So like it was more that I had my mom's side of the family like had all lived here. So I had come out here like once a year from the time I was like born until 10 years old when my great grandparents passed away. And so like when we were looking at all of that, what's really cool is there's states that allow the parent to basically like teach whatever they want. So there's some states like New Mexico that you have to register as a school and then you have to teach what the school wants you to teach and blah, 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 blah. So like I would have to teach Common Core, but then at the same time, I'd also be teaching it the regular way. So it would make sense. As where out here, I get to do whatever I want.
Whatever you want.
Yeah. And so
I guess
there's different rules of different ways, but like it's really beneficial to be able to be like, okay, well, and there's a wider age range of like ages as well. So this is probably cheating, but I tend to hold my kids back in the beginning. So then that way they get longer being able to do like high school sports.
Yeah.
So, like, I'm still
I've
teaching.
I've noticed that here, like my son could start like VPK next year, or he can start a year later. Like they give the parent, the option or whatever. Um, but I guess that would be step one, right? Is checking with your state. I know Florida is very flexible, but some states may not be. So like if a parent, is interested, first you got to figure out what the state requirements are. But then like, do you have any recommendations on where to go from there, because I think because homeschool is becoming more popular and accepted, there's so many different things, like so many curriculums, and there's like co-ops and all these different things. I know for me, it's very overwhelming. Like, I don't even know where to begin. Do you have
Yeah.
any tips on that?
So, like I said, I was homeschooled before there were co-ops and like all of those kind of things. And we're friends with homeschool families that do co-ops. We personally don't. But that's just also like personal preference. Our life is busy enough, and I just don't really want to take that on as
Yeah.
well. Um, so you don't I feel like a lot of times too, you're putting the same pressures on yourself like when you had them in school to do like all the extracurriculars that you wanted them to do when you're looking at all the additional things for homeschooling because you feel like you have to do them to give them all the opportunities. And that's really not the case. Like find a curriculum that align like obviously check your state first, right? Because there's going to be rules. So like Texas is super easy. You just have to notify the state that you're homeschooling. Some states like they'll have to do the state standardized testings. Some states you don't. So it's just to check like what your rules and regulations are for what you have to do. And then like I honestly pick and choose what I like from different things. So like in elementary school and that kind of stuff, like I really like Abeka's cursive. Like I think they teach cursive fantastic. And that's something that's important to my mom. And it's something that I see the value in. And so like we do, their whole cursive curriculum. There's like science programs and curriculums that like, so you don't have to go in and say, I like this whole entire curriculum. This is what I want to have. You can pick and choose what subjects you like and what you align with, to give them like your education, right? Like of what you're wanting them to learn as a parent. There are some states where it's like you're going to have to do this many hours of math, this many hours of science, this many hours of history, this many hours of this, that kind of stuff. But then also too, your field trips count, So like science, one day we're not going to do it. We're going to go to the science museum. Like we're going to do different things for different pieces. So like finding pieces and some of it, like there's going to be some years where it's like you're in the middle of a program and you're like, you know what, I hate this. We're done with this for now. And I'm going to switch you into something different because there's some of them that like, they think homeschool parents have 10 million years to be able to teach their children. And I'm like, this is a 92-step project. This is not happening. We're skipping over this and we'll do something else to be able to teach you the same thing. And that's like the benefit of it, right? Is like being able to make it so it fits your lifestyle and it fits your family and it fits like if we want to go on vacation in the middle of the year, it doesn't matter. We can go on vacation in the middle of the year and I move that week to another week because it doesn't matter. We do year round instead of doing like school time because it's less hours per day. And in our state, we can, as long as we get it done in 365 days, they don't care. I tend to do more 7 days a week instead of 5 days a week because then it's even less time per day. So like my kids are more at like the hour and a half, hour, 30 minutes some days, like depending on what they're doing. And my 5-year-old is obviously doing a lot less than my 10-year-old, but like she's technically not even in anything. It's just she wants to read. So that's what we're working on. So
Wow. Well, I feel like I'm convinced. I feel like any doubt that I had, you've completely helped me with, because it's really just nonsense. You know what I mean? It's just like excuses that aren't really valid in the grand scheme of things. And I don't know. I really appreciate it, because it's like a lot of pressure as a parent. And to hear from someone that's actually been through it and you have your kids in it, it just, I don't know, it gives me a lot of comfort hearing that side of things.
Yeah.
absolutely, it's hard enough to be a parent. I think kind of from day one, like we're in the hospital and we're told we're doing things wrong from the second that they're born. And
Right.
so, like the same way that they're being taught these things in school, we've also been taught and conditioned that we're basically failures as parents. And that's like ingrained into us. Like if something happens with our kid, rather than being empowered, like, most people don't have like the friend that like when you're doing really good, they say good job. We just have the friends that we know are talking behind our back saying the crap that we've done, right?
Yeah.
And so we're we're really not empowered as parents that we've ever made the right decision for our kids. And so it's really stressful to make that decision, to especially when it's against the norm. And then you're going to have more people telling you that it's wrong. But the thing is then like you said, like I haven't met someone who's homeschooled that didn't love when they were homeschooled.
Yeah.
Because I even, my daughter's friend who's 11, like she was a homeschooled for a year and she loved it. Like her grandma couldn't do it anymore. And her grandma ended up actually passing away last week. But like she was homeschooled for a year and she had to test back in to go to school. And she actually tested in a grade higher than she should have been because of that year of being homeschooled. So, my cousins, they were homeschooled, I think, for a year or 2 years. And my aunt was really bad at it. And they just went to Disneyland every day instead of actually like homeschooling them. But like when they went back, they were able to test into the year that they were supposed to be in. So they just got like a 2-year break. And that was the most restrictive states. That was in California. So, like even that's what I've always saying to people too. Like if you're questioning homeschool, it's a year. You try it for a year. And then when it's time for the next year, reevaluate and see if it's fit. Like, did you love it? Is it fitting your family? Is it better? And 9 times out of 10, they love it. But worst case scenario, you will be able to jump in exactly where you would have been if you had done that year in school.
That's a really good point. It's not like it has to be a final decision. You can try it and go from there.
For your littles, like try it. If it doesn't, they're going to test in at the same level or the higher level. Every person I know that's had to go back to school, they've all tested in at the bare minimum, the level that they were supposed to be.
Yeah.
So in New Mexico, they had a thing that was called the lottery scholarship. And if you graduated with like a 3.6 from a New Mexico school, you got your associate's degree for free, but they didn't count homeschoolers. So, and there was a lot of like the homeschool community was fighting it and all that kind of stuff. And I was going back and forth of whether I should get my diploma or whether I should just get my GED. And that's when my mom had that whole conversation about like, what do you want to do? Like, why are we going to that? And when we did that, I actually had to start testing in for classes because I thought I might be going to get my associate. So like I had started testing in to see if I could even get in. And then I ended up getting my diploma and not going because I realized I was like, I'm not going to pay for this. I'm not going to use it. So there's no point. But when I was testing in, I was testing into sophomore level classes.
Yeah.
So
I mean, the bar is pretty low, like with the public school system. So
it's not hard. It's not hard. And I mean, by finishing that whole book, in high school, like I learned a heck of a lot more than my friends who graduated with honors. And I'm like, how do you graduate with honors? I did all your homework. That's how. But like, because I was already done. Like I was so far ahead. My friend would always be like, hey, can I look at this assignment? Like, I don't care. Go for it. Go for it. But it's not, you can take it year by year. You can take it semester by semester and see like what you like or what you don't like. But especially high school, like I think so many people do it the opposite way. They like homeschool all of elementary school, middle school, and then in high school, they'll send their kid to school. And that I think is the worst. Like my high school experience being homeschooled was the best. Like I got to do so many things that bettered my future because I wasn't stuck in a concrete cement building for multiple hours a day.
Right. You actually have time to do what you want to do and focus on the things you actually care about and are passionate about.
Yep. And I still, for society's sake, I still got my diploma. But like I said, I haven't run into one thing so far in my life that I was like, I really wish I had gone to college. I really wish I had been in high school. Like nothing.
As a mom, like I'm just so grateful that we like connected and started talking about this. It's like I put it out there, we talk about like asking for signs.
Yes.
And I put it out there and here you are. And then there's Angie and like there's quite a few people in the group, but it just like as a parent, it feels, I don't know, like validating to see like other people that think like I do and are, like you're just giving me so much comfort that, okay, I'm not going to screw up my kids. Like, this is actually probably the best thing that I could be doing for them. Um, and if it's not, then okay, next year or next semester, we try something else and it's not the end of the world. And I just feel like, I feel like 1,000 times better. I can't even tell you how much this has helped.
And I'm also too, I'm a big advocate. Like if you're done, because there's been a few high schoolers that I've talked to, I'm like, test out. Like test out for the year. Then you're gonna have a few more months to like figure out what you have a few extra month break to figure out what you want to do, what curriculums you want to do, all that kind of stuff. Like get all your credits and everything in line. And then like you go into the next year like really refreshed instead of trying to also cram all your time out right in the middle. Because schools make you think because of that federal funding, right? Like they make you think that you have to be there for this certain amount of days, or they're going to like, there's in New Mexico, like if you miss a certain amount of days, that like you'll get a summons to like go to court to explain why you weren't like your kid wasn't in school for like those days. And we forget that like our kids belong to us.
Yeah.
They're mine. I own them. They are mine
Mhm.
until they're
Yep.
18 years old. Like the school does not own them. The state does not own them. I am in control of their future. I am in control of what they get to do. And my kids have a say, but like a school can't tell me yes or no that I'm taking my kid in or out of school. Like school can't, like we forget the power that we actually have because
Yeah.
we've been
We're the parents. Like it's our decision at the end of the day. And you're right. Like they don't want you to think that, but that's the truth. And it's a good reminder. We all need that reminder, especially, since COVID. It's like sometimes you question that because they really, kind of ingrain it in you. But yeah, the parents have the ultimate say.
In New Mexico, as soon as the governor got the like legislation to be okay that they got the full federal funding for the year, even though there weren't 180 days of school, she stopped all e-learning and they had like a 4-month summer vacation
Hmm.
because she got all the money for the
Yeah.
state. And so it didn't
Yeah.
matter.
Yeah. It's wild. I mean, ever since the Department of Education started, not one metric has improved. Not one. I mean, billions of dollars, lots of funding, but not one metric improved. And it's like that was eye-opening for me. That was kind of getting me to question everything. So it's like you really have to kind of wake up and see what's happening here. And I feel like I've gotten through all of that. And now it's just like the inner turmoil, questioning myself and everything. But I feel like you literally just cleared all that. Like everything that I was worried about, it's like, okay, this isn't really a worry. This is just more conditioning that
Mhm.
I haven't worked through yet, basically. But now I feel like I've worked through it.
Yeah.
How are you feeling about it, Alexis?
Good.
Good. Do you think it's something that you want to do?
Yeah, maybe. I'm a little more
Yeah.
convinced now, I feel like.
We've been talking a lot about it, and it's like I feel like every sign,
Yeah.
but in any case, like I think moving forward, even if you didn't want to do it full time, even like how it's set up where you could do it halftime, like
Yeah.
that's a possibility. But I think it's,
I feel like it would be better to try it my junior year than my senior year.
yeah,
Something to think about too is like if you're like craving the school aspect, because I know some people like kind of crave that, is you can think about homeschooling for your junior, senior, and then get your associates at the same time. So you can do dual enrollment. So that way you're getting college experience,
Yeah.
which is it has its pros and its cons, right? But um it's more freeing. Like you're not stuck in a school, like you're outside more, you're moving around more, like that kind of stuff, than being stuck like in a high school
yeah,
Yeah.
lot too, so that way you get the structure of school, but then you're doing both at the same time. Because I think like the way they did it in New Mexico, at the end it was like you did 3 days homeschool and then you did 2 days, like you did Monday, Wednesday, Friday as homeschool, and went to campus Tuesday, Thursdays.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
that's kind of how they do it here. They let you, like, you can take a certain amount of classes at home versus in school.
yeah,
So it's a lot to think about, but it's good. I feel like, that's why I wanted her in on this conversation because I feel like she's at the age where, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not going to just force anything on you. Like, I want your opinion on it and everything. But it's good for me to know too for her younger siblings because had I known all this when you were crying every single day when I took you to school,
Yeah.
like things probably would have been different. So,
and also too for the littles, it's really cool to see what they're actually interested in. Like
yeah.
what is actually going to pique their interest? What is something
Mhm.
that they actually gravitate towards? Not knowing anything, not having any traditional schooling, like what subjects do they actually like?
Yeah.
Like getting to learn those kind of things and how their brains function is really, really cool. Because like
Yeah.
my son's super black and white analytical, like he can put together he can take apart a motor, put it together like on these little cart, like that is totally my son. My daughters are like free and like art and like flowing and like that kind of stuff. And it's cool to be able to change things up for the way that like they learn and like what's fun for them. You
Yeah,
know,
because everyone's different. You're not having to do one thing for 30 kids in the class. Like everyone can have their own.
math for my oldest, half the time is baking. She loves baking. And so we're doing fractions all the time and adding things together and everything like that. Like that's math for us.
And that's going to actually help her in the real world. Like
Yeah.
Yeah.
learning how to bake and use math that way. Like,
I was just talking about this with my grandma. 'Cause she was like, they don't have culinary at your school. And I was like, nope, they don't offer it anymore. Someone set the culinary class on fire too many times, so they got rid of it.
Here you go. All the stuff. No, it's interesting. And if as you have questions and things come up and that kind of stuff, please reach out to me because if I
Oh,
haven't
I
persevered
appreciate
with
it.
my
I
kids, like
will.
so please, yeah, when you have those doubts or anything, because I'm sure I've been there with me, like, what the heck am I doing? And so I'll help any way I can. So
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for taking
thank
time out of your
you.
day to talk with us. This has
Of
just been like
course.
so amazing. And you really, like, I cannot tell you, I feel 1,000 times better. It's,
I'm so glad.
I really appreciate it.
You won't regret it. I don't know anyone who does. And so just try it.